Allahu Akbar. Hayya ala salah. Allahu Akbar. So, again, I wanted to say welcome to you all. Thank you, gratitude for coming out this evening. You could have been anywhere else. Sister Jasmine, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
Doing wonderful?
How about yourself?
Doing well. Alhamdulillah. I am going to pick on you for a moment. This is not premeditated. I'm not doing this because we have more people in there. I was going to pick on you prior to them coming in. What I want to do is I want to actually take this time to answer any questions, regardless if they are trivial or important, about Moorish Science Temple of America, this Moorish Divine and National Movement, our Prophet Noble Ali. No question is too taboo. No question is not, you're not going to get a gash from me or like a how dare you. It's nothing like that. I want you to be just as honest and truthful, because the important thing is with any organization, whether you're visiting or that you're a member, that you understand what we're about. And being that you are a guest, we want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of what this organization is about. Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Shoot.
So is this what you would like questions from me?
Yes.
Let's see.
Should you turn it down?
So I guess there is a couple questions I have.
Good.
So when we were studying the Prophet Noble Ali and his journeys, I guess through Africa and Morocco and learning about Islam to bring back, he had a couple of bases for Islam. I think it was Sunni in particular that he was studying under in Morocco. So does that mean that because that wasn't the only thing he studied many religions as well as Sunni and Christianity and a bunch of other things together. But does that mean that the Moorish Science Temple of America, although it's still separate, has a base in Sunni?
Okay. It's a loaded question. I do have, let me ask the question, okay. And then I want to sidebar with a question from you.
Okay.
All right. So the overall question is the basis of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Is it Islam or is it Sunni Islam? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Make sure. All right. The answer is no. The answer is no. If I was to put a secular label on our basis of Islam, and I'm gonna get to something else as well. It would be more Sufi Islam. All right. Few reasons. First reason is that, as you can see, our ceremony, our form, and our practices are what you will call, according to the Sunni, unorthodox, meaning it is not of what some would call, quote unquote, the Sunnah. All right. When Sunnis mention the Sunnah, they're using they're basically saying that Sunni basically means practice. Sunnah basically means practice. So what they're saying is that followers of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam, that they are adapting as much of the practices as the Prophet Muhammad as possible. The reason that they do this, from my opinion, which offers no proof of truth, is that the current inhabitants of Saudi Arabia and those surrounding areas, they're looking to be, when they reach Jannah, as close to the Prophet Muhammad and Allah as possible. Why am I saying that? All right, because a lot of the Sunni practices still has some basis in ancient Arabic or ancient Arabian superstition. All right. So when you get when the Prophet Muhammad, he comes onto the scene, if you will, he gives us a pattern. He gives our descendants a pattern. And if you notice, something that I recommend that you study prior to the Prophet Muhammad is Jahiliyyah, or the age of ignorance, if you're not familiar with that. And it gives you a rundown of, and I'll spell it.
I was going to ask that. I'm curious.
Somebody give me another. Jahiliyyah, which is basically ignorance. And anyone who has sat in on any of my measures, I often talk about Jahiliyyah, or the age of ignorance, because again, that was a time where, right, this is exactly right. That was the time when the inhabitants of Arabia, they were scatterbrains. They were just about everywhere. They were taking in so many customs, because you had Hebrew or Jewish people come in. You had people from the Hindu. You had Zoroastrianism. They all came over here to Mecca to put their shrines or their idols, if you will, at the Kaaba. So the inhabitants of Arabia at that time was taking in all of that, but they still didn't know how to necessarily put it together. So not to go too far off, going back to the concept of Sunni or Sunnah, which means practice or habit.
Did you say that's Sunni?
This is Sunnah.
Oh, Sunnah.
So Sunni comes from Sunnah.
Is it the same?
Yes.
Okay.
So what you have is Sunni is a derivative of Sunnah.
Okay.
So what particularly came first was Sunnah, and then it was Sunni. All right. And you have another term in Al-Islam or Sunni Islam called fiqh. Fiqh basically means habit. You have a book or piece of literature called the Fiqh al-Sunnah, which is basically the habit of practice, or the practice of habit. So those tie in to what the followers or the mu'minun of Muhammad, what they saw him do. All right. They saw him when he. See if I can give you an example. Ablution or wudu. So when they right before prayer, you have to clean yourself, right? Okay. So the sunnah, according to that particular denomination, if you will, would be to wash your hands first. Wash your hands 3 times, both hands 3 times, all right? Then after you wash your hands 3 times, you rinse out your mouth 3 times. Then you rinse out your nostrils, both nostrils 3 times. You rinse out your face 3 times. Everything is going to be 3 times. Rinse out your face, then you get your arms, your head, and then your ankles through your toes. And then after that, you give an affirmation. The basic affirmation or the basic supplication will be La ilaha illallah. Basically, there's no deity except for the deity. That is the practice. All right. So any person that is considered to be Sunni will follow that to the T. Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
It does.
Okay. I don't want to keep going on and on and on. All right. So why do I say that the Moorish Science Temple of America is of more of a Sufi practice? All right. one reason I said again is because our practice or our habits are not verbatim of the Prophet Muhammad. All right. Sheiks in particular, before they as they get ready for their meeting, they do a form of ablution or a form of wudu, because when you approach this rostrum, you're in representation of the Prophet, and per Act 7, it requires us to keep our hearts and minds pure and our bodies clean with water. All right. And it also, when you look into the Moorish literature, it talks about how we are to emulate the Prophet in our actions and our speech. When we pray, that's another thing that's offshoot. All right. This word pray. Who knows what pray means?
Invoke.
Okay, not exactly. Yes, but no. But can you give me a direct meaning, like a definite meaning?
It means to ask.
There you go. Yes, to ask. All right. So we have the Moorish American prayer. What Sunnis in Arabic is also known as namaz. All right, which means to pray. But you also have what Sunnis do, they call salah or salat. They'll say, I'm going to make salat, right? Then they'll say, so what you'll get in the Sunni community is that salat will be synonymous with prayer. And quite the contrary, the salat or the prayer part comes after the salat. Salat means to make amends. I get it. To make amends. All right. So when you hear a Sunni Muslim say, "I'm going to make salat," he's basically saying, "I'm going to make amends for whatever sins that I've made for that day, so on and so forth." All right. It says in the Sunni doctrine that Muslims or Sunni Muslims are to pray. How many times are Sunnis supposed to pray?
3 times, I'm assuming.
That is the great debate. But for the sake of argument, 5 times a day.
5.
All right? 5 times a day. So you are to make salah 5 times a day. You are to make amends 5 times a day. All right? After you make that prayer, after you make that salah, see, I even said it. After you make that salah, after you make the amends, then you do what you make dua. And that means supplication, which means to ask, which basically means to pray. You're asking. So after you make amends, then you ask for Allah to make the rest of your day prosperous and peaceful, etc., etc. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. All right. So on and so forth. Moorish Americans have what you call the prayer. All right. Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation by night and by day through His holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. Right. So essentially, in the Moorish American prayer, we are asking for the protection and the guidance of Allah by way of the Prophet's instructions, right? And we as Moorish Americans practice, or we would pray as many times as we see fit. Sometimes if we don't have nothing else, if somebody gets on our nerves throughout the day, and we may be somebody that's just coming into the organization of the Moorish Science Temple of America, we may not even know any of the Prophet's instructions in the Moorish Holy Quran, but we know the Moorish American prayer. So we say, Allah, Father of the universe, Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, so on and so forth. That is our prayer, because we're asking Him to guide us through whatever irritation that we have or agitation that we have at that particular moment. That may be all that we know. Those that are more well versed in the Moorish Holy Quran, they may actually pick up this Moorish Holy Quran and they may read a particular instruction or a passage from that. All right? Does that all make sense what I just said? All right. So, with all of that being said, going back to why we consider ourselves Sufi, is because of this important word.
When you say we, are you talking about Moorish Americans?
I am talking about Moorish Americans. Yeah. Right. Right. Islam. All right. I'm so angry at you right now, Brother Raphael. Brother Raphael, he, I wonder if I can find it. You remember what you said, Rob? About Islamism? Probably not. Islamism, he said it so eloquently on Facebook, but Islamism is the religion of the Moorish American. It is not al-Islam. It is Islamism. It is the practice of peace. Islam in Arabic means peace. We all know that, right? It is. All right. Islam, if you will, means peace. All right. Ism is is an action, right? So we're practicing the state of being peaceful. All right. What's beautiful about the Moorish American religion of Islamism is that it goes beyond just the Arabic context of the Sunnah. As you know, we honor all true and divine prophets, true and living divine prophets, if you will. But Islamism allows us to practice or allows us to establish our relationship with Allah by any one of these or beyond. Okay? Sister, you pass that. You pass me that phone. Got you. Our brother Rashid Ibn Haliym-Bey, our resident cameraman and M19, he says that Islamism allows me to adapt many different Asiatic spiritual practices without being placed into a particular box, but it illuminates the fact that truth is one. Islam? That is very beautiful. So, for instance, I had this talk with the brother Jabari one time. I told him that because we're saying that we're Muslims, again, we're adapting the Arabic language in that sense, in our terminology. That doesn't mean that we have to directly be Sunni. All right? It means that or what we're giving reference to is the last primary language of the Moors that inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Just as English, if you will, was the primary language of trade and so on and so forth in America was the same as Arabic, because you had so many different tribes, sultanates or kingdoms, if you will, that lived in Africa, but they knew that by adapting some of the customs or adapting the customs of Islam or al-Islam, that they can trade with people from Saudi Arabia, people from East Africa, Sudan, so on and so forth. So even if they spoke a particular, I'm going to use, this is the only thing I can call to remember right now, but the Yoruba, all right, or the Igbo, all right. So they have their own separate language, of course, right? But the majority of the people that inhabit it, or if I'm not mistaken, the Yoruba, if any of those tribes or sultanates, if you would, the ruler was a practitioner of Islam. So when he was when he was doing business with the other Arabs, he was speaking in the language of Arabic. All right, that was our primary language. So our prophet is returning to us a language that was used by our forefathers, a universal language that was used by our forefathers. If you find out that you are of another tribe or a group of people, so on and so forth, of course you are more than welcome to study what that language is. But the primary language for the Moorish American that was reintroduced to us by a prophet is Arabic. You practice being a practitioner of Islam has many different avenues. Again, it can be by way of Confucianism, it can be by way of Buddhism, it can be by way of Islam, it can be by way of Christianity. Moorish Americans can practice their Islam any route as long as it falls in line with this Moorish Holy Quran. If you are well astute in the Moorish Holy Quran, 9 times out of 10, it will. You can even practice Zoroastrianism if you feel that way. All right? Doesn't matter as long as you develop that relationship with Allah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right?
I have one quick thing as
One
well.
more thing. One more thing I'm going to throw at you. All right. So I said Sufi, right?
That exactly was going to be what I was going to
All right. All right. So Sufi came about by way of Shia. Because after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ built a form, as all dynasties and empires, there was a power vacuum. So you had those that, hopefully I'm not everywhere with it. You had those that believed that the next caliphate of Al-Islam should be one that was the closest, should be the one that was closest to the Prophet Muhammad. The Shias believed that it was Ali. The Sufis believed that it was Abu Bakr. All right. From here, again, from Shia, because it was believed by the Shias that Ali, a relative of the Prophet Muhammad, had the purest doctrine of the Quran, versus the Sufi, who claim that not only did they have the purest form of the Quran, but they also are more familiar of the practice or the habits of the Prophet Muhammad than Ali. And again, from Shia with Sufi, they will tell you that I forgot what the inhabitants of Arab say, but Sufi it means wool. It means woolly. All right, and they said that what you would have, and this you can tell me how ridiculous this is. So they said in the desert, you had inhabitants that would be wearing these wool garbs. In the desert, wearing wool garbs. That is too hot. My theory is that it was in reference to a group of inhabitants of Arabia that had woolly hair. That is my presumption. Specifically, as you know, there's so many. There's just like any form of spirituality. There's so many denominations of Sufism. One denomination of Sufism in particular that I would liken to the Moorish Science Temple of America would be Baha'ism. I think I said that right, Baha'ism. Pardon me if I'm spelling that wrong, but you should be able to look that up. Baha'ism. What's interesting about Baha'ism is that it's very similar to the Moorish Science Temple of America, in which they don't necessarily call their practice Islamism, but they do not restrict their practices to just the Sunnah. So you're familiar?
With Baha'i, yes.
Okay, there you go. So I don't got to go any further. So if anybody has any questions about Baha'i, I'm gonna after we load the meeting, I'm gonna send them to you.
I didn't say all that.
But basically, the same practices of Baha'ism falls and is very similar to the practice of Islamism by way of the Moorish Americans.
So is that to say because they also believe that multiple religions came to the same universal truth, just in different paths?
Right.
Okay.
Another thing is that the age-old debate about this word. All right. In Sunni Islam, and it's beginning to seep over into Shia and Sufi as well. Unfortunately, certain denominations of Sufi and Shia. The Prophet Muhammad is considered to them, quote unquote, the last and final prophet. All right. That is a misnomer because in the Quran of Muhammad, the word for last, believe, is, can't remember. I get to you in a minute. Is it Akil? Is it? Okay. It's Akil. Gratitude. Akil. All right. When you become well versed in Arabic and you begin to read the Quran of Muhammad, you will not see Akil Allah. You will not see that word anywhere. You will see Khatam. Khatam Nabiyin. All right? Khatam is one of those words in Arabic that has various references based on the context. All right? Khatam is in reference to seal. All right? Seal, of course, has many different definitions. There's an animal called the seal. You can seal a document. You can have a seal that is a symbol or logo. What the brother is wearing around his neck is considered to be a khatam or a seal. So the debate, or the great debate, is whether or not in Arabic Khatam Nabiyin or Khatam means when you seal something, are you finalizing it? I say no. Because again, there are several instances in the Quran of Muhammad where they give the term Khatam. And it is not in reference to something being closed. It is in reference to something being the best, or something being the best example. If you were to talk to our Grand Governor, Haru Ranisi, he gives reference to, at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, he had what you call a signet or a ring, khatam, also known as a khatam. So when he was writing documents to other nations or to other groups of people, it is said that he would melt the candle wax and he would seal the document with his ring, the signet. That's what he would say. That is one of the major dichotomies between the Moorish Americans, how we worship Allah and give reference to Allah, and the secular Islamic community is the debate over the Prophet. Because we believe that our Prophet in these days and times is Noble Drew Ali, alayhi salam, that was sent to us by Allah. We also know without a shadow of a doubt that all people were sent a prophet. All people were sent a prophet. And for the quote-unquote African American or black people in America not to be sent a prophet in a time of of need, if you will, that is selfish, in my opinion. That makes sense? All right. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay, good. You have another one?
I have many.
Okay, you can give me, what time is it? Give me somebody, give me time.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock? Okay. Is the grand governor coming today? I don't know. He's coming. You say he's coming? Okay. All right. One more question. Shoot. Did you have any questions, sis?
Yes. I did.
Okay.
You mentioned something about building a closer relationship with Allah. And I just wanted to know if you could give some pointers on how to get closer to Allah.
Okay. The first thing that I would recommend is to study yourself. And I know that may seem like a cop-out, but if we were to open this book, this will be the first thing that our prophet tells us to say, or tells us to do. Know thyself, thy Father God Allah. All right? What does that mean? It means a whole lot of things. A few things in particular, studying your thought patterns, studying your habits, what you do that is beneficial to you, what is it that you do that is not beneficial to you. I often have to remind brothers and sisters on this quote-unquote conscious path that thinking about the time where you reach that age, that time of enlightenment. I can only speak for myself. I reached the time of enlightenment at the age of 21. So that means that I have to shed 21 years of whatever else I was doing. And that means I have to really get into myself and figure out, okay, well, praise Allah that I've gotten to this point. But before then, again, what is it that I was doing? What is it that now I know these things, now that I know I'm not quote unquote Negro, black, and colored, you know, what is it that I'm still doing that still deludes to me considering that? Yeah. So that means that you have to change your habits. You have to change the things that you do on a day-to-day basis. Specifically, understanding what it means to call on the holy breath. All right. We have to walk before we crawl. We have to crawl before we walk. We have to crawl before we walk. And that actually gives, that is to my point, because most of us think we can walk and fly before we do anything else. But it is a process. Our process as a collective, coming from the time from chattel slavery to now, we have to think about all of that. Let's do this. How many if you don't have any relatives yourself, how many know of some relatives or know someone that has a relative that used to be a slave? Like a grandfather, great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-grandmother, so on and so forth. You don't know anyone? Okay. So let's think about this though, even if we don't. All right? Let's put this in perspective. When were we emancipated? When was the quote-unquote Negro so-called emancipated? 1865. All right? So 1865 all the way forward to 2018. If we really was to do our math, it's really not that far. That's only, how many? 4 or 5 generations? Right. Okay? So we got 4 or 5 generations of trying to salvage what we once had. And this is 4 or 5 generations, anywhere going a little 100 or 100 plus years, looking to salvage something that happened to us 400 years, 400 plus years, from 1610, or some would say 1492, all the way to 1865. It's a long time, all right? So I digress, and to answer your question, the first thing that I would do to build that relationship with Allah is to study yourself. Okay, so Prophet says if I were to ask what to study, I would say yourself. When you are well studied, and I would ask what to study again, I would reply yourself. So study your habits, study what you do, study what you don't do, study what you need to do. But also study everything that surrounds you. Because we are just as good or just as beneficial as our surroundings or even our circle. So once you take a look at yourself and see how you are, then you have to see what your circle of friends and associates are about. All right? Are you familiar with Robert Kiyosaki? Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Okay, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Something that he's written in his book that stands out with me is the idea of liability versus asset. So you have to think, all right? Assets are things that, of course, that are beneficial. All right? Liabilities are things that are not beneficial, if you will. All right? So now the question that you have to ask yourself is that, am I an asset or liability? All right? Am I an asset or liability? If you find yourself, after you've well studied, that you are an asset, now you have to ask, the people that are around me, are they an asset or liability? What are these people? First and foremost, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I'm contributing to everybody's life? If I have my girlfriend here and girlfriend this, we all hang out. The only thing we do is go out to the club, but we haven't started nating out a business. I got 5 friends. And 5 friends we've been doing for 10 years is going out to the club. But for 5 years is going out to the club. We couldn't pull any money together and start a business.
Wow.
So that's the issue. That's not an issue with just not only yourself, but your friends. Because that means your friends haven't had any sense to say, okay, well, instead of us this Friday going out to the club, we can go to the club another time. Let's take this Friday and go to More Shine Simple of America. Or let's sit down in our houses and see if we can come up with an idea to start up a business. All right? So, what are my friends doing? And going or coming to this concept of spirituality, once you've studied and you understand yourself, you can start to say, okay, well, what is it? Me having an idea of knowing who I am and what I do and so on and so forth. Which one of these or beyond resonates with me regarding ceremony and form? Because we have this tendency to say that we are spiritual people. But being spiritual just means that you've established your connection with Allah. Some of us claim to be spiritual, but in all actuality, we're just doing stuff to establish a spirituality, but we don't know what it means. All right? The becoming spiritual, you can't become spiritual without some type of ceremony and form. That is religion. The concept of religion gets a bad rap because it gets intertwined with dogma. So we think, all right, here's an example. All right, let's talk about me. I have to talk about me in a minute. I personally, Rashid Ibn Haliym-Bey, chose the path of Prophet Muhammad. Why did I do that? I did that, for one, I consider myself to be a well-reserved person. All right? It didn't resonate with me that someone else was responsible for my faults. And I wanted to build, and this was in my early stages. So of course I'm just telling you about my beginning stages. A lot has changed since then. But at that time, Al-Islam, or the degree of the Prophet Muhammad, gave me that connection. And he said that I don't have to go to a preacher or a pastor, so on and so forth. I can make salah, and I can follow the sunnah, if you will. And these things that I will do will establish my piety and build my piety and build my iman, which is faith. And that will establish my relationship. All right? I wouldn't have been able to establish my relationship with Allah if I didn't have those things to remind me or to remember the relationship that binds me to love and unity. Does that make sense? That makes sense what I'm saying? Yeah. All right. That is my religion, or that is the religion, if you will. Well, the dogma comes in is if you come in and say, well, I'm gonna just pick on your earrings. I'm studying I'm studying the Kemet. I'm studying Kemet. And I say, well, you can't study Kemet, and if you study Kemet, that's because you worship the Dajjal, which is the one eye, and you're going to hell. That is dogma. All right? Religion is understanding that the same, even though your ceremony and form may be different, maybe even I'll go even farther to say slightly different, it does not alter the nature of truth.
Wow.
Because if you look in the pictograms or the hieroglyphs in Kemet, you will see brothers and sisters prostrating. Which is where, if I may inject this, is partially where the Prophet Muhammad got the Salah from. Because he saw that he saw that different nations and different groups of people that had a relationship with the Most High, which we call Allah, that what they did is that they prostrate themselves. It's called sajda. Sajda means to submit. All right. The term masjid comes from sajda, the place where you submit. Okay. Building that relationship with yourself. Understand and building and with that building your relationship with Allah, you get to understand the holy breath. The holy breath is that saving power. All right. Why do I call it the saving power? Because it's power in the breath. Prophet said in by way of the Moorish Holy Quran, there's power in the winds. All right. That part of that wind is the breath that you exhale and inhale from your body. All right. The art of breathing is very important to the Asiatic, worldwide. Regardless if you live in these United States of America or if you live somewhere in Africa or in India, breathing is very important because it allows you to think clearly. When you breathe, when you inhale and exhale, you're giving oxygen to the brain, which is allowing you to think clearly. So just as anything else, you develop these methods of breathing. The art form of jujitsu, there's a certain a part of jujitsu, or the practice of jujitsu, where they practice breathing, where you can make your stomach do all these cool things like a wave and whatnot, but those are breathing techniques because it's allowing you to have control over of the amount of oxygen that comes to your brain. Brother Khalid said this, and I'm going to start to wrap it up. He's talking about vaunt like the body. Our grand governor says often, are you thinking your thoughts, or are your thoughts thinking you? What does that mean? Is that we as lords of the plane of manifest, we kind of take that for granted. Meaning that the body, we have more control over this body than we think. That is, if you will, the degree of Jesus, in part. Is that Jesus had so much, he had control not only of his higher self, he had control also over his lower self. And when I talk about this lower self, I'm not talking about things that are just carnal and evil and ooh and all that stuff. I'm talking about he had knowledge and wisdom of this plane of manifest. Therefore, he was able to control whatever his thoughts were, his psyche was. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. All right? He was able to control his breath. Thus, he was able to control his thoughts and not allowing his thoughts to take over and react. These are the things that you do. When you do this is developing your relationship with Allah. This is, in order for you, and first you have to develop your relationship with Allah on this plane of manifest, knowing that you need sustenance. Most of us want to, again, just get this spirituality, and they just want to astroplane and leave the earth. You have to leave something behind for earth. And in order for you to do that, you have to have the knowledge of that lower self. You have to have knowledge of all those things may manifest. But you have to be able to control the challenge, if you will, is doing it without causing harm to your sisters that are behind you, your brothers in front of you, so on and so forth. Because that's how we fail. We said, now I needed this food, but what am I willing to do to get that? Do I have to kill my brother or my sister to get this food? You know what I'm saying? That is what caused us to fall, amongst other things. But I digress. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have any add-ons? No? Brother, you good?
I add to the Sufi portion.
Indeed.
Islam. We were talking about the Sufi men, woolly hair.
Mm-hmm.
And And you also mentioned that they wore wool clothes.
Right.
And the wool clothing was to show their moderation in society and the control of their passions and desires. How they limited even in their clothing, because wool is considered one of the lower materials or fabrics. So the Sufis always wore that to show that they're disconnect from the world.
Islam. Yeah. So, just to recap, most Americans practice Islamism, which is a form of Sufism. What else did I say? I said a whole lot. Knowing thyself and thy Father God Allah, very important. There's a chapter 10 where it talks about the unity of Allah. All right. So, as I said before, our Prophet returned to us the language of Arabic. So we refer to the great God as most Americans as Allah, but He is known by many names. All right, and you have to look within your heart and with Allah and decide that name that is good for you, and then that how you want to practice this ceremony and form. All right. So again, it may not be any of these. It may be something else. It may be Yoruba. It may be Zoroastrianism. It may be anything. But we have to understand that this is a universal truth. All right. We have to also understand too, as Moorish Americans, I can't leave this out, that we have a responsibility as members to, regardless of what path we choose in our Islamism, is to promote that universality as Moorish Americans, inhabitants of Africans living in America. The truth of our Prophet in this organization and what we're looking to do. Islam family?
Islam.
Yes.
When we deal with the isms, we deal with Baha'ism, Taoism, all of the isms.
Mm-hmm.
And we deal with Islamism specifically.
Indeed.
It's the only one that's homegrown for us that includes nationality.
Right. Indeed. Expound.
That's the point.
That's the point?
That's the point.
All right.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Hayya ala salah. Allahu Akbar.